Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. I see one more person I'll let in. We'll continue to let folks into the meeting if they join. But thank you for joining us for this meeting. My name is Eric Lardy. I'm the Chief of Advanced Planning with Planning and Development Services. Today we're going to address amendments to the county zoning ordinance that are going to assist the county in its efforts to assist persons experiencing homelessness through shelter facilities, as well as minimize impacts associated with homelessness on county facilities. A couple of housekeeping items for those of you. So thank you for joining us on this Teams presentation. A couple of things here is there's a chat and a raise hand box for those of you that have logged in from a browser or a phone. You're able to also mute and unmute yourself. We ask that everybody mute themselves, and then if they have questions, to go ahead and raise their hands, and we can go through Q&A. It looks like there's about 15 persons that have joined us, so I think we're going to have plenty of time for questions as we go through our presentation, and we'll have those at the end. But if you have any questions you want us to address as you're thinking of it, feel free to leave us a chat conversation, and we'll go from there. We have a number of individuals from the county. We're represented from County Department of General Services. Myself and Audrey, who's going to be giving the rest of this presentation, are for Planning and Development Services. And then we also have folks joining us from the from Health and Human Services. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Audrey to give the rest of the presentation. Audrey, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Today's presentation's agenda will start with the project background, which will lead into the Board of Supervisors direction, then an introduction into the grouping of the amendments that are to meet the board's direction, the project's environmental review process, and then we'll end today with the project timeline. The zoning ordinance was adopted by the Board of Supervisors to regulate land uses in the unincorporated or non-city areas of the County of San Diego. The zoning ordinance is divided into 8 parts. You can see those on your screen. It's with a web picture. Basic provisions, use regulations, animal regulations, development regulations, special area regulations, general regulations, procedures, and village regulations. The purpose of the zoning ordinance is to serve the public health, safety, and general welfare, and to provide the advantages resulting from the implementation of the county's general plan. The county's general plan is the county's long-term blueprint of the county's vision of future growth. The zoning ordinance must use this blueprint to organize the unincorporated areas as the general plan's goals, policies, and implementation programs direct. To facilitate this, the unincorporated area is divided into zones according to the present and potential uses of the land. A zone is a combination of the use regulations and other regulations as described in the zoning ordinance. The use regulation is not a zone, but specifies the allowed land uses. This is important to this project because we will be talking about some potential amendments to some of these zones, such as residential, commercial. Today's specific presentation is going to be to discuss the May 19th direction from the Board of Supervisors to amend the zoning ordinance to further assist the county in its efforts. As Eric had mentioned, we want to minimize the impacts associated to homelessness on the county's facilities and assist persons experiencing homelessness. Currently, the shelter zoning regulations are within the emergency shelters category and the transitional and supportive housing. Currently, emergency shelters can only be permitted in the industrial zones. Within the zoning ordinance definition for both transitional and supportive housing, the design of the actual building structure determines if we are going to categorize it as a family residential or group residential use type. These use types have permitted uses, limitations of use, and or require a major permit in the various zones that you see here. Background on this project. On September 11th, 2018, the Board of Supervisors declared a shelter crisis emergency. Since then, the County of San Diego has engaged in activities to address homelessness. On January 28th, 2020, to further the county's commitment to addressing the concerns surrounding homelessness, the Board of Supervisors directed the Chief Administrative Officer to take the necessary steps for immediate, short-term, long-term solutions to address the homeless situation in the unincorporated areas of the county, including identifying sites and properties that could be acquired for an emergency, temporary, and permanent housing. On May 19th, on motion, the Board of Supervisors directed staff to amend the zoning ordinance to further assist the county in its efforts to minimize those impacts. On May 19th, the board adopted 8 recommendations. The 8 recommendations were to adopt the urgency ordinance, amend the zoning ordinance, authorize the Director of Department of Purchasing and Contracting to issue solicitations for service, authorize and expand the capacity of the hotel motel voucher program, implement a local rental subsidy program, authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to expand the capacity of the fiscal year's hotel and motel voucher program, authorize the CIO to implement rental subsidies and obtain contracting services related to those programs, authorize the CIO to develop ordinances intended to minimize the impacts associated with homelessness on parks, recreation users, and facilities. Our project focus remains at that recommendation 4. Within recommendation 4, there were additional directions. Staff were to amend section 1006 of the zoning ordinance to exempt a broadened definition of the county-owned and operated facilities to include county-owned or operated facilities and county facilities that are leased or contracted by a third party to provide a public purpose, which would include emergency shelters and other health or social services. These facilities, expansion of the facilities, needed to be owned, operated, or financed by the county. Recommendation 4B was to amend section 1334 of the zoning ordinance to expand the definition of emergency shelters to include safe parking, safe camping, safe storage, and day shelter facilities. On motion, the board made a change, and it stated that we needed to define emergency shelters to be located within the highest concentration of homelessness. Recommendations 4C authorize the use of properties leased from the state of California located in the unincorporated areas of the county for emergency shelters. And recommendation 4D further amended section 1006 of the zoning ordinance to exempt county-owned and operated facilities to include transitional and permanent supportive housing, owned, operated, or financed in whole or in part by the county. Staff's recommendations are to meet the board's directions. We will be recommending to amend the zoning ordinance to continue to help persons experiencing homelessness and to minimize the impacts on county facilities. We will be amending section 1006 as directed and sections 1334. We will also be updating some specific terminology in the zoning ordinance. Those include emergency shelters, transitional housing, supportive housing, permanent supportive housing, emergency bridge housing community, safe facilities, which include parking, storage, camping, and day shelters. When we want to look towards how we're going to address the highest concentrations and locating these facilities in those locations, where you'll be using the best available data that comes from the point in time count and some other staff observations we can get into a little later. The suggested amendments also include expanding the uses in the residential areas here. We will, as we've shown before, we are limited as to where these facilities can be located. And so these amendments we'll propose will expand that. We will exclude the residential mobile home areas. We will be excluding the C42, which is visitor serving commercial use regulations. S81 is the ecological resource area regulations. S82 is the extractive use regulations. S86 is the parking use regulations. S94 is the transportation and utility corridor use. And the last one there, the SWF, is solid waste facilities and the regulations for those. On motion, the Board of Supervisors directed the placement of shelter facilities to be located on properties owned or leased by the county, state, or federal government lands, and to be placed in the areas of highest concentration. Currently, the county is using point in time count and the county staff documentation of encampments. On the screen, you will see the numbers from the 2020 point in time count by the community planning areas. The requirement for placement to be in the highest population areas is not a zoning ordinance requirement. The responsible department placing these locations will be required to make the findings and have specific approvals based on the facility type. Other county departments will address the leasing, contracting, and evaluation of the potential individual sites. So just to be a little more clear, the zoning ordinance will only address the amendments of the zoning ordinance. And again, the placement of these facilities will be handled by other departments. In CEQA, a project is defined by a whole of an action which has the potential for resulting in either a direct physical change in the environment or a reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment, such as an activity directly undertaken by any public agency, including amendments of the zoning ordinance. However, CEQA offers projects to be exempt from conducting an environmental impact report if the project meets one of the many existing exemptions. The county is still in process of analyzing if any exceptions can apply. As we've noted on the screen, we are looking at a few. Additionally, the state has passed Assembly Bill 2553, which amends Section 8698.4 of the Government Code to expand the scope of the provisions to apply within any county or city that has declared a shelter crisis and expanded the described exemption from the California Environmental Quality Act. So we will be looking into this bill further to see how this can apply to this project. Public engagement process. So we have our first webinar today. Our second one, which will repeat the exact same information, will be on December 2nd. And then we'll be presenting to the community planning groups between November and December. We've started this process now. Continue to develop our recommendations using best practice research, state definitions, and professional input. We are looking for the public for their input to craft final amendments that will be presented to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors. As you see, we are holding various engagements, and we hope that we can receive your guys' inputs today, and through our emails and phone numbers. You guys can leave a message and we can return your call if you decide to use that phone number. This is the schedule laid out. We do plan on going to the Planning Commission in January and then having the board hear this project in March. At this time, if there are any other questions, I guess we can go to the questions and answer portion through the Teams meeting. Eric, I'll turn that back over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. And just a couple of housekeeping. If everyone could maintain muted if they're not talking, we'll go ahead and call on folks. The first person with their hand up. Oh, Kevin, you put it down. Kevin, did you want to ask a question or see a comment? And then we also have one in the chat that came in.
No, Eric, I was just going to ask whoever had their microphone on to turn it off because we're hearing their keystrokes. That was all.
Okay, thank you. So then I see a question for John, and why exclude parking zoning? And I think that was in reference to the slide 10. So I would just say that we're looking at broadening the exemption, and if it's a county facility, it would be exempt from all of these. There's actually not a lot of land that is zoned for parking use. I think we can look at that closer and see if there's any properties that we should be looking at with that. But generally, those zones that are listed are very specific zones, only in very few areas of the unincorporated county. So, for example, solid waste facility is only for permitted landfills, of which they're not few. And then so we can look at that more, but my feeling is it's not. There's not a lot of those in the unincorporated county. So thank you for the comment, John.
Let's
see. Oh, John, I also see you have your hand up. Is there anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure we're only talking about changing in zoning to allow for broader use of county land for the stated purposes of shelters, permanent supportive housing, safe parking, etc. This isn't about regulation of use of existing facilities, there was several comments about reducing the impact of homeless individuals on other facilities, and that would be outside of the scope of this project, or no?
Yes, that's outside of the scope of this project. We're really looking at changes to the zoning for properties owned or operated by the county to allow, and broadening those to allow more.
Is it only properties owned or operated by the county, or county-wide zoning?
It would be unincorporated area-wide zoning for any properties owned, operated, and controlled by the county. So it wouldn't apply to any county-owned property within a city. It would only be county-owned property within the unincorporated area.
Okay, and so it would not have an effect of zoning of private land in unincorporated areas.
Correct. It would not.
Would it be possible to get a map of what of the properties that we're talking about?
So there's not any specific properties identified at this point. It would be a county-wide change, but it would apply to any properties that the county owns or controls now or in the future, which is standard kind of how our zoning works, because the county does acquire property. So for example, if the county acquires a property for a parkland, those are currently exempt from zoning. That doesn't mean the county doesn't evaluate environmental impacts and have outreach. It just is not regulated by the zoning ordinance itself. There still could be actions and review.
I probably didn't phrase that correctly. Could we get a map that indicates the currently affected properties by this change?
We could give a map. It would be the vast majority of properties in the county.
Owned by the county.
Yes. I mean, we could give a map of anything owned by the county today that doesn't say the county can't acquire other properties, and then it would be exempt.
Got it. Thank you.
I see Shelby raising her hand.
Yeah, hello. I just had one question. It's kind of general. I heard this statement mentioned a few times, the goal of minimizing the impact on county facilities. And I was wondering if any of the speakers can kind of specify the concerns of like what specific concerns the county has for like impact on the county facilities for having these kinds of homeless shelters or different safe park environments, if those specific concerns could be described, because I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take the first response on that, and then I can maybe see if any of my colleagues in Health and Human Services want to add on. I think we're not saying impact on the facilities themselves. I think essentially what we're saying is if there are more opportunities for shelters and safe parking and other components, then maybe there wouldn't be as much impact on in other public spaces, county parks and road rights of way, and culverts and that kind of thing. So I think that's really what we're saying is this is broadening the regulations to have more safe areas for individuals to go to. Is there any of my other county colleagues, anything you want to add on to that? And I see Shelby, you have your hand up if you want to follow up or if that was from before.
Yep, forgot to lower my hand. Thank you, Eric, for the answer.
Okay. Is there anybody on the phone that would like to speak? I believe the way if you need to unmute yourself is to dial *6. John, with your hand up.
I think I heard somebody else that was speaking.
I think that was a keystroke.
Oh, so so if we're building shelters or permanent supportive housing, why are we excluding all residential land?
We're not under today's regulations. So if anybody, the county or public, was to try to do this today, it could only go into industrial land, and that's something that a lot of cities and counties have done in their housing elements and other requirements. I think there's broader things now if you look at what cities and counties have done more recently, but this would allow these facilities if it was owned, operated, or controlled by the county in residential zones.
Okay, I misunderstood. Thank you.
So I'm not seeing any other hands or questions. So what I think we can do is make sure.
If I could, I just wanted to say that, as an advocate for people that are experiencing homelessness, I'm very much in favor of these changes, and I'm glad to see the county making these things happen. We desperately need more facilities like that, and I hope that the county will move forward on this as well as execute on investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So I see a question from Melanie. For here, the question is, will it also add the other definitions as well? And the answer is yes. We will be adding definitions for the other types of facilities, transitional, supportive, permanent supportive, safe parking, etc. Those are things that are not well defined in our ordinance or not defined at all today. And so they will all be defined in these components. So not seeing anything else. We are recording. I'll get to you in a second, Shelby. We are recording. We are also posting this online. We're happy to stay on and answer any additional questions or comments. We're also available on Audrey, if you want to go back one slide, just so everybody has our contact information here, and then our big picture schedule. But if you think of anything, this is the way to contact us. Shelby?
Hi. So this might not be the right venue, but I'm just curious about how this change in the zoning law, I guess if the thinking, and maybe this is a historical question with the original proposition, but if the city's kind of involved in this conversation as well, because it just seems like the possibility of putting a lot of shelters and housing in kind of more unincorporated parts of the county that are kind of further away from services. So I'm just wondering if that was a part of the conversation back when this first came up, and if the city and the county are kind of conversing about this, and if it's sort of like a shared effort to make sure that there's more housing everywhere, as opposed to an effort to kind of put people out in the corners of the county where they won't be seen as much, sort of thing.
Hi, Shelby. This is Omar Passons. I'm with the Health and Human Services Agency, and I'm just gonna. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah. So, Shelby, one of the things that Supervisors Jacob and Desmond did in the board letter, the sort of the official action that came before the May 19th one, was to direct staff to go to Lemon Grove, Santee, La Mesa, El Cajon, and there's one city I'm missing. I apologize. Poway, to start to open the door. She didn't mention them by name, but she said the board letter gave us the approval to go work with those neighboring cities on a memorandum of understanding or other agreements to try to do exactly what you're talking about. And so I guess what I would say is, to the extent that you have contacts there, it's good. We are working with those city managers, assistant city managers, and are always. It is always helpful to have even more support for that collaboration, to let those other cities also know, that this is a shared sort of thing. And so that's been an ongoing process. I had some good conversations with a couple of them, and we're working towards there. But it's not like it's not firm, I guess I would say. It's a long process. So we're trying to get there, I guess I would say.
Thanks so much for sharing, and I apologize that I know it's really frustrating when someone asks a question that's kind of ignorant because I didn't, know the history. So I appreciate you, filling me in on that.
Oh no, don't. You're very welcome, and to everybody that's listening, don't worry about apologizing. Like, everybody's got really busy lives. We're all dealing with a pandemic. This is what we, Eric, me, Audrey, Angela, this is what we do. So we work for the community, so, at the pleasure of the board. So if you have questions, you should feel free to ask.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. John, did you have another comment, or is that your hand from earlier?
I think that may have been my hand from earlier. Thank you.
No
There
problem.
was there was a question in the chat that I don't think you answered from Melanie Tilke. I don't know if you saw that, but
Yeah, I saw that. I can
Oh.
say it again. The yes, we are broadening the definitions of all of those. So we are going to be adding definitions. Our ordinance, in my opinion, and I work on ordinance a lot, doesn't have clear definitions for all of these things. And if it's not defined, it doesn't say where it's allowed. So we're going to be adding definitions clearly for all of these types. All right. Well, hearing nothing else, we'll stay on for a few more minutes. I will stop the recording. Again, our contact information is here. We're available if you think of any additional questions. But we really appreciate everyone logging in and joining us in this new way of doing public outreach that we've adapted to in the last 6 to 9 months.
Eric, if I could just chime in to say this, I mean, if the people who joined are likely interested, concerned, involved, and I know I saw one community leader log on. There are probably others. Just know that we're also just open to engaging about what the county, as a threaded team of planning and health and social services, what we're all trying to do, and listening to you so that we can work together. So I put my email in the chat thread there as well. Just so you know, I mean, that's not the purpose of this meeting, but I figured if people are concerned or interested enough to log on for this, they may want to engage in other ways. So thank you for giving me that little bit of license, Eric. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
great work, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.